I'm joined now by Ikpongke Sotiloye, who is Group Head of HR at Prime Atlantic, to review some of the headlines in greater detail. Ikpongke, such a pleasure to have you. Good morning to you. How are you today?
Definitely. It's a pleasure to meet you, Abby. Very good.
Yes, we have quite a bit to get through, but let's begin with what many would term a big win for the cryptocurrency industry. I mean, nearly a dozen investment funds approved, giving Bitcoin a space for investors to invest more openly. Let's take that from you.
This is monumental. I believe that so many investors in America have been waiting for this to happen, and it's more like wanting to see SEC approve this. While we know that the SEC chair seems very neutral about everything, and I guess because of speculations on it being volatile and it being a platform for illicit funds, but I think for all the people and all the investors, I understand there are over 52 million investors in the States, and they've waited for this approval for over a decade. So this is a big win for them. Another thing that comes to mind is the investors, the institutions that now see that it's being traded through ETF. So next is, how would they react to it? And I see that loads of people would sit back and watch its performance over a number of days and months ahead. Nonetheless, there are other ways to look at it, and that is retail investors like you and I, who maybe have been very conservative and have stayed very traditional over the last couple of months or years, and now it's an opportunity for you to kind of peep in and trade. So I'm really looking forward to what the next days and months ahead will be.
Absolutely, very exciting. I'm glad you mentioned the SEC chair as well, because it's very important to highlight that he also did say this is not an entire endorsement. In fact, the risks are still there. In many ways, we could call it a speculative volatile asset in many rights, and people should be a little cautious. Do you believe that this would drive or deter interest in it? Because on the one hand, we've waited for it, and then on the other hand, you're like, hey, it's still a bit risky, isn't it?
It is risky, and that's why I said that I find that you would have a bit of the population observe first. For those who have, had these wallets for years, would dive in very quickly. But I also trust that because a lot of things are changing, people are moving from just being traditional and wanting to explore a little bit. You'd find a little bit of the populace dive in, and then you find some observe. And I see strongly that very big institutions will stay back and see its performance, especially those that are leading, because it's very competitive. I like what SEC did with throwing in 11 companies, so that you can observe and see who's leading. And there's been a lot going on in the last couple of days. So I would say definitely some of the investors would be observant, and some would just dive in because they're a little bit more big risk takers.
Absolutely. And there would be those, the risk-averse ones. So let's get bullish about it. It's very exciting and monumental, as you mentioned. Of course, we'll keep our eyes peeled and see how that goes. But let's come back here to Nigeria to the much-awaited and highly anticipated event. I'm talking about the Dangote Refinery set to run after, quite a bit of a wait. It's quite exciting, but what are some of the areas we should be aware of in terms of the developments here? What makes this quite significant?
This is big for Nigeria. I know that we waited for it over a while, but I think also that we want to get it right. And I must applaud Dangote and the banks that have, partnered with the body, Dangote Investment, to making this work. But I think there are key things we need to look out for. The opportunity for us to be able to trade at least 650,000 barrels a day. Secondly, the opportunity for resource. There is the unemployment rate, as you know very well, is about 4-point-something%. And even the youth unemployment is 7.3% as at last year by National Bureau of Statistics. But I think that what we need to focus on is the opportunity. Dangote has said that there will be at least 100,000 jobs available. That is huge. Not only that, the opportunity to manage Nigeria. You know what's happening with our refineries. Yes, Port Harcourt Refinery has opened up, but the news says that it's going to be doing about 60,000 barrels. But when you look at that vis-a-vis what Dangote is going to kick off with, I see that we are going to, increase our revenue in Nigeria. We'll see that, show up in our GDP as a country. It's going to reduce our exports. this is huge, and there's a lot to look out for the refinery.
Yeah, it certainly is huge. And I mean, talking about opportunity, it's very promising. I mean, I think the promise really is quite monumental here, especially because if you look at a facility that is able to process quite a variety of African crude grades as well. You have Middle Eastern crudes as well. You're looking much wider than that. So, of course, like you said, the promise is really great, and we just have to embrace it and hope that this reaches its optimum potential, because that really is very important. All right, let's stay here in Nigeria and look at the CBN. It's been quite an eventful week, if we have to say. You know, when you look at sacking the boards of unions of Keystone Bank, Polaris Bank, Union Banks, this is, on the one hand, many people applaud it, but there are also some concerns around that. Let's get you to dive into it first, and then we might get a little more granular about it.
This news, the press release, I mean, a lot of Nigerians that have been following these banks, this is not a surprise for some. And for some, it took a lot of people by surprise. I think most of us that it took by surprise is because we are customers. And I'm thankful that CBN has stressed that, you know, that the depositors' funds are there. But beyond all the fears, what I like with what has happened is that we didn't get appointments of MDs that you would even just swing the entire populace to saying who really is this or who have they appointed. I'll just kick off with Union Bank, Yetineni, and they've given her quite, a bit of her experience and what she will bring to the table. But most importantly, taking us back to the beginning, is why did this happen? I see that there's still an ongoing investigation, but the highlights, by CBN's press release was on corporate governance, was adherence to why, they were given these licenses, and just ensuring that they adhere to all of these things. So I find that these decisions will always happen. And as we know very well, the different industries, the financial industry is one that once the regulators come in and they start all their checks and balances to audit that we're doing what we need to do in the organization, you would always find these things show up. So I'm not really excited, because when you look at how people on boards have been sacked and would even have the opportunity to play in those roles in the financial sector tomorrow, just because of the laws that are in place, nonetheless, we need to be optimistic in the sense that they have reassured us, we the depositors, and two, they have put leaders there that would drive the objectives of the businesses forward.
Absolutely important that you mentioned that. Yes, this is a more corporate governance, non-compliance issues, which the checks are very important. It also sounds a bell to others to sit up, right? Just to say, look, there's a system in place. But what implications would you say this has on the shareholding and ownership of the bank?
If you recall, just before, and I'll use just one example, and that it would be Polaris. If you remember, before Polaris was given that name, there was Sky Bank, if I'm not wrong. And during that period, before we knew it, the CBN had put in some money to drive it being, what it is. But the truth is, if at the end of the day that the shareholders who are waiting and looking and hopeful that the profitability of the business, looking at their financials, I haven't really taken a good look at all of their financials, but when you look at that, I see that you would find a lot of people at this time sell their shares, would look into other banks that they think are more promising. But what CBN has done is they have put leaders in front, and I think we shouldn't be too in a hurry to make decisions on that, and people would observe. I take that if you have been committed to these banks over the years, Union Bank has been here for so many years, but you would look at the profitability and see if there is any possibility of still staying in as a shareholder. So I find that some shareholders would opt very quickly, very, very quickly. But if you have been really following all the financial statements of the bank, you would have made certain decisions by now.
Absolutely. And I guess in many ways this also speaks to, it could inform whether this was drastic enough an action to sort of reinstate the faith of some shareholders, depending on how you look at it.
Way to look at
well, it's a sore point, but moving from that to another sore point where we look at Google laying off hundreds of staff. I mean, I could even be wrong and we could be approaching the thousands mark at this point. Let's talk about this. And then we are going to look at the implications of that at the wider tech sector, because we, of course, are seeing some factors playing here. I'm talking about AI, but let's get into it.
This news, I am not surprised, by
You're
the
not
news.
Surprised by it.
I'm not surprised because of the many changes that have happened with technology over the last 2 decades. It's just been a huge drive. And as much as you would find maybe Google trying to reinvent different things, you would also find all the other tech companies. There's so much competition in order to drive and build solutions for the public. But one major thing with Google, as they've emphasized that they've never had this huge layoffs in all of their years, and I'm speaking to the layoffs from last year into this year. I know there was a layoff of over 12,000 in the earlier part of 2023 before this layoff, and they have been very careful not to tell us how many thousands they have laid off at this time. But most importantly, one of the emphasis is that they've said that they have laid off people in their engineering team. And the first thing that comes to mind is Google has looked at their structure and they're looking at their strategy, to pursue their targets for the 2024 year. And they're realizing more and more that they need to be more efficient for productivity. And emphasis have been made on AI. You and I know what AI has been from, and that's why I'll use over a decade. It's been there. It's been there for donkey. It's been there from the early 90s and the 80s. But if you notice, there have been so much improvement. And when we look at AI for what it is, it's really basically you are taking these machines to do things that you want humans to do. More like it's almost like very facilitated, And I believe strongly that what AI is doing now, not just only for Google and the many other organizations to drive in efficiency is remarkable.
Absolutely, there is that, but I want to pick your brain on this. Would you say we're beginning to see the beginnings of a massive labor shift owing to AI? Of course, because, it's very important you mentioned this has been around for a bit, but of course there's more of an awakening around it, especially within the technology sectors. We're looking at hardware, particularly with Google right now, the hardware division, engineering you mentioned, Google Assist. So there are certain areas that are naturally jeopardized with the emergence of AI. What do you portend? What does this portend, I beg your pardon, for the future?
I will use, for example, Google Assist, and I'm just going to write on that. Google Assist is competing with Siri, and is competing with, what's the Android one? There's one for Android also. Yes, and I'm very sure what I think has happened with Google at this time is that they've looked at their profits and they've realized that most likely their competition is leading, and they have also, and I think they're also reassessing what services they are offering at this time. So importantly, I see that over the next, and I know that by the time we're in Q2, we're going to see something else with this labor shift. It will continue. I don't think it's going anywhere. But more importantly, what worries and bothers on the humans is that a lot of people are going to lose. And if you don't have any alternative income beyond your 8 to 5 and the services you offer, either Google or any other organization who is driving AI at this time, you will struggle. So I don't think it's going anywhere. But another thing that I know bothers on a lot of individuals across the globe is there's just been all kinds of layoffs in the tech industry. Are we going to see another one in the next quarter? Is it going to be, because Amazon has said something in that regard. X has made a comment also in that regard. So what are we expecting? And I think it's a factor of the skills that we have in the workplace. How can we refine and ensure that the services we provide to our customers, at the same time trying to make profit, are working at the speed that we want it to. So I don't think it's going to go away at this time. And while we were speculating it, every day you wake up in the morning, you see something else that is happening in the tech industry. And I think it's the embrace. There was something you said earlier about an awakening. It really has been an awakening after the pandemic for so many of us. And OpenAI has come up with something else. the competition is huge.
It's really
and I think that every time everyone in the tech industry wakes up, it's like, okay, so what are we doing? How are we reinventing? How are we being more innovative and creative? And the workforce and the resource we have, how are they be able to, how can we marry both of them to ensure that we achieve success?
Absolutely. I think those are key words there. How do you reinvent? Because the awakening is also part of, even with the workforce as well, you might want to adapt your skills, and depending on what areas you are, with generative AI, you also could work with it's machine learning after all. So work with the system. But let's wrap up and look at the FX backlog paid by CBN to airlines, to the tune of $61 million. So let's talk about this a bit more. Well, that's just a part of it. I'm not even talking about the outstanding forward obligations yet.
On one side, it's great news, but unfortunately, when you look at how much hasn't been released, $800 million. The question here is, how patient can the foreign airlines be? And I think that Etihad and Emirates have already, I'm afraid of what's going to happen, but I know and I trust, and why I say this is because of the way the president has been responsive to situations in different sectors. I know we have so many conversations ongoing with budgets, etc. But in light of this, I see that Festus is going to want to come back to the table, the minister, and he will want to have these conversations again. But when you look at it, it's really a drop in the ocean. And I know very well between maybe yesterday and today and in the coming week, there are going to be several conversations. But the question here is the availability of funds to be able to make that happen. We have loans, we have so many things. But importantly, I think we need to be careful. We need to be very careful as a country, because the investors, we want to be promising, we want to be credible, are watching, and people want to invest in Nigeria. People want to see, the last part of this that is very interesting is there is an agreement, there's a bilateral agreement. We should be that country that keeps to our words. So people are watching, and I know very well that the president knows this.
Absolutely, very cogent points you shared there, Ikpongke. I want to thank you so much. This has been extremely insightful, and we hope to have you again on Business Week. Many thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.